March 21st, 2026 is not a soft transition, and you must not mistake this spring equinox for a simple seasonal shift. Mercury has turned direct. The light is changing. The atmosphere is splitting open, and you are standing at a threshold. Not a poetic one, not a vague spiritual idea. A real threshold between the life pattern that kept exhausting your heart and the new reality that is asking you to step forward with truth, discipline, and self-respect. What began yesterday with the weight of Venus and Saturn is not random emotional heaviness. It is revelation. It is the moment the universe stops whispering and starts showing you exactly what can cross into your future with you and what must remain behind. This is why the energy feels so sharp right now. One cosmic force is turning the page. Another is making sure you do not carry old illusions into the next chapter. The spring equinox has always been a sacred balancing point, a gate between darkness and light, but this year it does not arrive alone. Mercury direct begins clearing what has been tangled, delayed, misread, or emotionally distorted. At the same time, Venus and Saturn are exposing the structural truth of love, loyalty, maturity, and emotional reality. So if your chest has been tight, your intuition louder than usual, your patience thinner, or your heart strangely sober, you must understand this clearly. You are not falling apart. You are standing at the edge of a threshold, and the threshold always asks one question before it lets you pass. What is real enough to go with you? That is the deeper meaning of this moment. It is not only about romance, and it is not only about communication clearing up. It is about alignment. It is about the difference between desire and destiny. There are connections you wanted because they felt familiar, and there are connections your future requires because they are stable, clean, and true. Venus and Saturn do not care about fantasy for fantasy's sake. They do not reward emotional chaos just because it feels intense. They do not bless mixed signals simply because the chemistry is strong. They ask whether a bond can hold weight. They ask whether your heart has been investing in substance or in projection. And when Mercury moves direct under the light of the equinox, the threshold becomes undeniable. The fog begins to lift, and what you see may be sobering, but it is also sacred. You may have felt this building long before today. You may have spent weeks sensing that something was off without being able to fully name it. Maybe someone's words kept drifting away from their actions. Maybe a silence felt louder than conversation. Maybe you were waiting for clarity, for a reply, for a sign, for a shift, and instead you kept meeting delay, uncertainty, half-truths, or emotional ambiguity. You may have tried to be patient. You may have told yourself not to overthink. You may have carried hope long after your nervous system began telling you the truth. That is part of what this threshold is exposing. Not only what another person is doing, but what you have been enduring in the name of love, possibility, or emotional loyalty. For some of you, this has not only been about romance. It has been about friendship, family, work partnerships, or even your relationship to yourself. There has been a pattern somewhere in your life where you have felt the weight of overgiving, over-explaining, over-waiting, or over-accommodating. You may have been trying to keep peace where there was no true reciprocity. You may have been trying to decode emotional signals that should never have required translation in the first place. And because Saturn is involved, this is not a fleeting discomfort. This is a karmic review. This is where the threshold tests the integrity of everything that claims it belongs in your future. The equinox brings balance, but balance is often misunderstood. Balance is not comfort at any cost. Balance is not forcing yourself to stay calm while your spirit is quietly being drained. True balance sometimes arrives as correction. Sometimes it looks like distance. Sometimes it looks like the end of confusion. Sometimes it looks like the moment your inner life stops bargaining with what your soul has already outgrown. That is why this cosmic rebirth may not feel immediately soft. Rebirth does not begin with decoration. It begins with separation. It begins with truth. It begins when the threshold reveals that your old emotional habits cannot survive in the reality you are being called to. Enter Mercury direct matters here because it begins restoring motion where there has been mental looping and emotional static. It does not erase everything overnight, but it does shift the current. Conversations that stalled may resume. Thoughts that felt tangled may suddenly organize themselves. You may finally understand why something felt wrong. You may find yourself less willing to chase an explanation because your body already knows enough. You may hear from someone, but the deeper story is not whether they return. The deeper story is whether their return carries substance, accountability, and readiness. Mercury direct clears the path, but Venus and Saturn decide whether what comes toward you is built to last. That is the hidden power of this threshold. It is not asking you to react dramatically. It is asking you to see clearly. There is a difference. Reaction comes from fear. Clarity comes from maturity, and maturity is the spiritual muscle being built right now. You are being asked to stop calling intensity devotion, to stop calling inconsistency mystery, to stop calling emotional crumbs potential. The threshold is sacred because it will not let you bring a false story into a true beginning. If something cannot meet you honestly now, it will not become more honest. Just because you hope harder, this is why many of you may feel strangely split between relief and grief. Relief because part of you is finally seeing what you needed to see. Grief because seeing clearly often means releasing a version of the future future you once imagined. That can be painful, even when it is right. You may mourn not only a person, but an expectation. Not only a relationship, but the role you hoped it would play in your healing. Not only a delay, but the time and tenderness you poured into something that did not yet know how to hold you. Do not judge yourself for feeling the ache of that. Thresholds are emotional places. They are not empty doorways. They are spaces where identities end and new realities begin. Mentally, this transit can feel like the sound inside your mind has changed. Thoughts that once spiraled may suddenly become simple. Or the opposite may happen first. You may feel overstimulated, restless, almost mentally electric, because the system is reorganizing. Some of you may notice old memories resurfacing out of nowhere, not because you were meant to go backward, but because your psyche is bringing unfinished emotional contracts into the light. The threshold is asking you to recognize the pattern, not repeat it. You may remember what you tolerated in the past, and suddenly see how similar dynamics have been trying to re-enter. It's your life under new names, new faces, or more attractive disguises. Emotionally, the body may speak before the mind catches up. Heaviness in the chest, a lump in the throat, sudden tears without a dramatic trigger, a strange quiet after weeks of noise, a feeling that the answer has already arrived, even if no one has said it out loud. Some of you may feel emotionally distant from people you were just recently trying hard to understand. This is not always numbness. Sometimes it is your spirit withdrawing energy from what is no longer sustainable. Sometimes it is the threshold creating separation before your conscious mind is ready to name it. Spiritually, dreams may become vivid. The symbolism may intensify. You may dream of old houses, closed doors, missed trains, storms passing, or unfamiliar rooms filled with light. These are threshold dreams. They often appear when the soul is recalibrating and when destiny is reorganizing the emotional architecture of your life. Pay attention to what leaves in the dream world. Pay attention to what you refuse in the dream world. Pay attention to what suddenly appears whole, clean, or calm. Your spirit may already be walking the new path before your waking mind fully trusts it. Energetically, some of you will feel fatigue, not failure. Fatigue. There is a difference. Emotional clarity can be exhausting because it ends a season of inner negotiation. Your body has been carrying uncertainty, fantasy, hope, anxiety, restraint, and intuition all at once. That is heavy. When truth begins to surface, the system often crashes before it stabilizes. Rest does not mean you are weak right now. Rest means your body is adjusting to the weight of what it no longer has to carry. And now we must talk about money, because this threshold is not only emotional. Venus rules value, receiving attraction, and the way you relate to worth. Saturn tests structure, discipline, boundaries, timing, and consequences. When these two meet under an equinox with Mercury direct, financial reality becomes part of the spiritual message. This is a powerful time to notice where emotional confusion has been leaking into your material life. Have you been undercharging because you were afraid of losing approval? Have you been overspending to soothe loneliness, uncertainty, or depletion? Have you been waiting for external validation before treating your work like something serious? This energy does not want reckless expansion. It wants stable growth. It wants self-respect made visible through your choices. It wants you to protect what you are building. For some of you, a long overdue realization is arriving around work partnerships, contracts, creative collaborations, or the people you allow close to your resources. If someone is careless with your time, they may eventually become careless with your money. If you feel drained every time you speak about your goals with a certain person, do not ignore that. The threshold is not only about who gets access to your heart, it is about who gets access to your future. Mercury direct can begin helping stalled financial matters move again. Delayed payments, decisions, plans, or negotiations may slowly begin to clear. But this transit rewards precision. Read carefully. Ask better questions. Do not romanticize vague promises in business any more than you would in love. A clean no is more valuable than an exciting maybe that keeps your energy suspended. This is the season to build something that lasts, not to chase what sparkles for a moment and disappears. When it is asked to prove itself, self-worth is also under examination now. If you've been secretly feeling undervalued, invisible, or emotionally dependent on being chosen by others, the money story may reveal it. You may suddenly feel a fierce need to become more independent, more disciplined. It's more selective about how and where you invest your life force. Honor that instinct. The threshold is teaching you that receiving is not passive. It is relational. It reflects what standards you have accepted, what labor you have normalized, and what treatment you have unconsciously called familiar. Your health and body are woven into all of this. During intense, truth-revealing transits, the body often becomes the first honest messenger. Sleep may become lighter or more symbolic. Some of you may wake between certain hours feeling emotionally charged without knowing why. Hydration matters more than usual because the nervous system is processing heat, grief, and mental movement all at once. The throat may feel sensitive because truth wants expression. The jaw may hold tension because too much has gone unsaid. The shoulders may ache because you have been carrying emotional responsibility that is never fully yours. This is not the time to override physical signals just because you want quick answers. If you are exhausted, reduce stimulation where you can. If your body wants quiet, do not drown it in noise. If you feel emotionally flooded after certain conversations, treat that as information. Your body is part of the threshold. It tells you who feels safe, what feels stable, what feels false, and where your energy collapses. Listen to it with more reverence than usual. The future does not only speak through intuition, it also speaks through the body's refusal. Grounding will matter now. Food that stabilizes you, water that restores you, sleep that is protected instead of negotiated away, breath that reaches deeper than the top of the chest, time off screens when your mind begins to scatter. You do not need elaborate rituals to honor this transit. You need honesty. You need slowness. You need enough stillness to hear what your system has already been trying to tell you. The threshold does not demand performance. It demands presence. Now, we come to relationships and communication, because this is where the sharpest truth is living. Venus and Saturn are asking whether the bonds in your life are mature enough to survive reality, not fantasy, not longing. Reality. And reality is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is simple. Who shows up? Who follows through? Who becomes clearer when things get serious instead of more evasive? Who respects your boundaries without punishing you for having them? Who communicates with steadiness instead of emotional weather? You must pay attention now to behavior more than words. This transit is merciless toward mixed signals because mixed signals are often the language of misalignment. Someone who wants to build with you will not always be perfect, but there will be coherence. There will be effort. There will be accountability. There will be a felt seriousness when it matters. Someone who only wants access to your warmth, your availability, your softness, or your emotional labor may become strangely distant the moment truth, responsibility, or consistency enter the room. That is one of the clearest threshold tests of all. For some of you, silence itself is becoming the answer. Not because silence is always rejection, but because the type of silence matters. There is a silence that comes from needing time to process. And there is a silence that comes from emotional avoidance, selective investment, or lack of readiness. You can feel the difference when you stop arguing with your own intuition. If someone keeps you in confusion, keeps you waiting without clarity, keeps asking for understanding without offering stability, do not keep decorating that dynamic with spiritual meaning. The threshold is asking you to stop translating what should already be honest. For others, this transit can bring one of the most important conversations you have had in a long time. It may not be dramatic. It may be sober. It may carry the weight of truth rather than the excitement of chemistry. But it can mark a turning point, a real apology, a real boundary, a real admission, a real choice. Mercury direct helps language move again, but the quality of that movement matters. Words that come now must match the architecture of the future you are trying to build. If they do not admire the clarity, then keep walking. If you are in a relationship, this energy can deepen commitment, but only through honesty. Avoidance will feel heavier now. Pretending will cost more now. Whatever has been quietly off will want to be named. That does not mean everything is ending. For some, this is where the relationship grows up. For others, this is where it becomes undeniable that one person has been carrying the maturity for two. The threshold blesses truth before it blesses continuation. If you are single, this transit can be deeply empowering. Not because it erases longing, but because it refines it. You may suddenly become less impressed by charm and more responsive to peace. Less excited by uncertainty and more drawn to grounded presence. Less willing to perform openness for people who have not earned access to your emotional depth. That is not hardness. That is refinement. That is what happens when the threshold teaches you that discernment is one of the highest forms of self-love. So what should you do with this energy? First, slow down enough to observe what is actually happening. Not what you fear, not what you hope. What is actually happening. Notice the pattern without rushing to rescue it. Second, if a conversation is needed, let it be honest, clean, and simple. Do not over-explain your worth. Do not beg for clarity from someone committed to confusion. Third, protect your money, your time, and your nervous system. This is not the week to spend impulsively just to escape an emotion. It is not the week to chase unavailable energy just because the silence feels unbearable. Journal what is repeating. Journal what feels newly obvious. Journal the names, dynamics, habits that drain your spirit every time you try to cross into a more peaceful version of yourself. The threshold becomes easier to cross when you stop carrying what keeps proving it does not belong in your next chapter. Rest more than usual. Hydrate more than usual. Watch actions more than words. And above all, trust the sobering clarity that is arriving. Not every truth feels comforting at first, but the right truth always returns your power. Now let us move into the 3 zodiac signs most affected by this cosmic threshold. Cancer. This energy is moving directly through the emotional center of your life, and you may feel as though your inner world has become impossible to ignore. For you, the threshold is deeply personal. It is asking you to stop building your future around who you hope someone becomes and start honoring what is emotionally present right now. You may be realizing that your softness has been carrying too much weight, that your loyalty has been stretched beyond what feels sacred, or that your need for security has sometimes kept you near what was familiar instead of what was aligned. This is not a punishment. This is your rebirth. The equinox is illuminating your need for balance. Mercury direct is clearing emotional confusion, and Venus with Saturn is demanding that your heart become more selective. A truth about love, trust, or emotional reciprocity may land heavily, but it is clearing the path for a more stable future. Do not chase what hesitates in your presence. Do not shrink your needs to preserve a fragile connection. The threshold for you is about dignity. When you choose self-respect over emotional bargaining, everything begins to change. Libra. This transit is confronting the patterns you have used to keep harmony even when harmony was false. You may be seeing just how much energy you have spent smoothing over emotional imbalance, giving the benefit of the doubt or trying to hold relationships together through grace alone. But grace without reciprocity becomes exhaustion, and you are being shown that now. The threshold for you is not only about romance. It is about every agreement in your life. Work, friendship, family, your own relationship with your body and time. The equinox activates your axis of balance in a way that feels unavoidable. And Mercury direct begins exposing what has been too unclear, too delayed, or too slippery to trust. Venus and Saturn are bringing a sober revelation around standards. You are not being asked to become cold. You are being asked to become clear. The future opening for you requires relationships that do not depend on your constant emotional adjustment to survive. Let people show you whether they can meet the level of honesty and steadiness your next chapter requires. If they cannot, let the threshold close behind you. Capricorn. This energy cuts deep because it meets you at the level of responsibility, commitment, and emotional realism. You may feel as though something you have suspected for a long time is finally becoming impossible to deny. Perhaps someone has been leaning on your strength without truly matching it. Perhaps you have been trying to stay patient in a dynamic that keeps delaying emotional adulthood. Or perhaps this threshold is about you allowing yourself to want something softer. It's more mutual and more emotionally nourishing than what you have accepted in the past. The equinox shifts your perspective. Mercury direct restores mental clarity. And Venus with Saturn activates one of the deepest lessons of your season, which is that love is not proven through struggle alone. Something can be serious and still be kind. Something can be committed and still feel safe. You are being asked to release the belief that carrying more makes you more worthy. The threshold for you is about shared weight. If a bond cannot hold truth, tenderness, and accountability at the same time, It does not belong in the structure of the life you are building now, and even if your sign was not named, this moment still matters to you, because the threshold is collective. We are all feeling some version of this dividing line between emotional fantasy and emotional truth. The spring equinox is opening a gate. Mercury direct is clearing the road. Venus and Saturn are standing at the entrance, asking whether what you desire is also what can sustain you. That is the deeper rebirth here. Not just new beginnings. Better beginnings. Cleaner beginnings. Beginnings that do not require you to betray yourself in order to keep them. So if the atmosphere feels heavy, let it be heavy with meaning. If the truth feels sharp, let it sharpen your standards. If someone grows distant when honesty enters the room, let the threshold reveal that for what it is. And if you feel your own spirit becoming calmer, clearer, and less available for confusion, trust that too. Peace is not boring. Peace is often the first sign that your soul has stopped negotiating with what cannot carry you forward. March 21st, 2026 is a turning point. Not because the sky is dramatic for the sake of drama, but because your life is asking for a more truthful architecture now. The old chapter may have taught you longing, patience, and emotional endurance, but this next chapter is asking for discernment, steadiness, and alignment. You do not need to force the crossing. You only need to tell the truth about what belongs on the other side. This is your cosmic rebirth. This is your threshold. And the universe is not asking you to be perfect as you cross it. It is asking you to be honest. Honest about what drains you. Honest about what steadies you. Honest about who has shown up and who has only occupied space in your mind. Honest about the future you are no longer willing to build on uncertainty. Walk forward with your eyes open. Walk forward with your boundaries intact. Walk forward with the kind of self-respect that no longer confuses emotional intensity with destiny. Because what is truly meant for you will not fear truth. It will become clearer in it. It will become stronger in it. And as this new reality ignites, you will understand why the threshold had to be guarded so carefully. It was never there to punish you. It was there to make sure only what is real could enter.